Welcome to our military news channel. Today, we explore a shocking story from the battlefields of Ukraine, told by Li Jianwei, a former PLA soldier now fighting in a Russian mercenary army. His video reveals the harsh realities and failures of the Russian military, providing an honest look at the ongoing war. The brutality of urban warfare and its toll. Li Jianwei's video begins in a military bunker after weeks of fighting Ukrainian positions. He describes recovering from stress-induced symptoms, including not having a bowel movement for 2 weeks, likely due to lack of food. He also mentions eating butter, which caused illness, highlighting a critical issue. Poor medical care for Russian soldiers, both mercenaries and regular troops. Reports show that half of Russian military deaths in Ukraine are due to inadequate medical treatment. Tourniquet errors are also common, leading to unnecessary amputations. Li, who suffered minor injuries, reflects on the harsh battlefield conditions where soldiers often spend 8 to 10 hours before dying. He recalls intense street and house-to-house combat, where many soldiers, including his squad, were wounded or killed. The lack of medical staff and the constant threat of death in urban warfare are part of the brutal reality. Li's experience illustrates the high cost of Russia's strategy, with thousands of lives lost in seemingly insignificant territorial battles. Li Jianwei's team was prepared for combat but found no Ukrainian soldiers, only drones. These drones, likely the Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2, were carrying Bocheka bombs and scouting like Li's group. The drones, which have gained popularity in the war, are versatile, with bomb and kamikaze strike modes. One explosion hit Li's backpack, but spared him. The Ukraine war marks the first major conflict where drones play a significant role, with both sides utilizing them in new ways. Russia uses Iranian-made Shahed drones, while Ukraine relies on Bayraktar drones for defense. The rise of FPV, first-person view drones, which can be equipped with explosives and flown precisely to targets, adds another layer to the battlefield. Li's team likely encountered these drones while scouting, and, once again, he was fortunate to survive. Outdated and insufficient equipment. After the drone attack, Li Jianwei discusses the poor state of armaments used by his unit, focusing on outdated artillery and mortars. His team was equipped with low-powered Soviet-era Polish mortars that made a weak sound compared to the usual explosive mortars. Li highlights the danger of such equipment, reflecting concerns about Russia's reliance on outdated gear. Li's account mirrors reports of Russian soldiers using aging equipment, with some even purchasing their own gear. In 2023, Russia deployed thousands of Soviet-era military vehicles from storage, and by 2024, it was running low on such equipment, resorting to buying back old weaponry from other nations. While Ukraine also began with Soviet-era equipment, Western support has provided more advanced weapons, further highlighting Russia's reliance on obsolete gear. Li also mentions how Russian forces, relying on outdated trucks and weapons, believe they can win through sheer manpower. This strategy, however, creates fear among Russian soldiers, as evidenced by Little Black, who was terrified during combat when Ukrainian drones were spotted at night. Low morale and desertion in the Russian army. Little Black had no military experience before the war, only riding with an armored regiment. Li, too, feared urban combat and wasn't prepared for such conflict. During a mission, Little Black fled, leaving Li to face the threat alone. Li managed to escape and camped in an abandoned building, later reconnecting with his comrades. He accepted Little Black's apology, but remarked that such desertions are why you can't trust anyone on the battlefield. He contrasts this with the PLA, where soldiers share a bond of loyalty, suggesting that Russia's military lacks the same unity. Li's story highlights the larger issue within the Russian army, where many conscripts, like Little Black, have little combat experience and are treated as expendable. Morale is low and desertions are common. Reports from 2024 claim hundreds of Russian soldiers are fleeing the front lines. While desertion carries harsh penalties, many soldiers, like Little Black, are willing to risk it to escape the brutal conditions. Li also notes other challenges facing the Russian army, such as poor morale and food shortages. He recalls a brief resupply that allowed him to eat, but the crisis quickly returned, further weakening the troops' resolve. Shortages of food and water on the front line. After eating canned food 3 times throughout his deployment, Li only ate the 4 pieces of butter he found while patrolling. Li seems almost regretful as he recalls eating 2 cans of meat and chicken after complaining about the lack of food on the front. The combat reports seem to support this. Business Insider reported on an intercepted Russian soldier wife call in October 2023. The soldier informs his wife, "We haven't had food delivered in 3 weeks. The water arrived 7 days ago." The soldier lost his strength to wear his bulletproof vest. The soldier confirms Li's death rate estimates, adding that Russian officials don't care about his unit, which had lost 100 soldiers in a few days. Russia's Potemkin army was another Modern War Institute article from 18 months previously. According to it, the Russian army's initial invasion in February 2022 included MRE rations that had expired in 2015. The institution believes Russia had to request modern MREs from China to reinforce its troops due to the circumstances. It indicates 2 things regarding Russia's secret military operation. Russia looks to have no logistical system to supply its soldiers, in addition to utilizing outdated weaponry and staffing its army with conscripts who don't want to fight. Some Russian soldiers are famished as they fight due to food and water shortages. That was true for the soldier Business Insider reported on, who was too frail to wear vital safety gear. Li had similar problems, surviving for days on 2 cans of food and a few slices of butter. Russia's meat grinder is involved again. The troops appear to absorb Ukrainian ammo and will be replaced when they die. Second, Putin seemed to expect Russia to dominate Ukraine in the early fight. Perhaps he thought it was okay to send troops with expired provisions. They wouldn't be needed long enough to cause ration issues. The conflict had lasted almost 2 years by the time this footage was made. Lack of nourishment may also contribute to moral issues. Without food or water, soldiers are forced into fights they think they can't win. The worst part is that they never stop. Li says he never anticipated being on the battlefield that long. He thinks the longest was 24 hours a while ago. "We rested during the day and fought at night." In contrast, Li says he has had to battle day and night to survive the Ukraine war. Li reiterated that Ukraine's many drones prevent Russia's troops from resting. He's right. Ukraine is using drones more in the fight as their relevance has been noticed. Canada's CBC reported on March 24th that Ukraine is increasing local manufacturing of FPV drones and counting on its partners to provide more as part of military aid packages. According to the outlet, Ukraine wants 1 million drones by 2024. That's over 2 drones per Russian military in Ukraine if the Kyiv Post's 45,000 statistic is right. Li said drones are so common that Russian soldiers can see them approaching. Drones outnumber birds in the skies, overwhelming them. 1 or 2 will lead, Li says, with the rest following in droves. He claims that signal interference on the front lines is so severe that Russia's men can only meddle with the 2 leading drones. They only bomb soldiers and their environs, leaving the rest intact. Li then claims Ukraine has good intelligence collecting. He says they'd know when a tank arrived on the battlefield. Drones deliver anti-tank rockets and C4 explosives quickly. The tank collapses after 2 or 3 explosions. Li said Russia's military believes they have nowhere to hide. The fleets of drones hovering over Ukraine and the intelligence they can acquire make even tank deployment dangerous. Soldiers never know where the next missile will come from until it's too late. That, combined with street fighting, which most Russian soldiers are untrained for, is terrible. Li says ruthlessness is necessary on both sides. Neither can afford to let the other help its wounded or gain an advantage during an assault. Li declares, "You cannot hide." Li says he reunited with soldiers from other troops after evacuating from the reconnaissance patrol that saw his 4-person team try to escape away to show the ongoing combat. Without respite or recovery, the newly formed group attacked 2 strongholds, losing dozens of troops. The dead were abandoned on the streets. Russia's stubbornness. 3 offensives by Li's team failed in the next 2 weeks. Li thinks they advanced 100 meters in 3 attacks. Again, that suggests Russia's strategy. Taking territory, Melitopol and much of Donbass are under its control. Also capturing territory near Kharkiv. Russia slowly pushes, throwing soldier after soldier at Ukrainian positions. Perhaps Putin's strategy is straightforward. Keeping enough forces on the front lines to steadily wear down the Ukrainian resistance is more important than repeated offensive failures. As Li notes, Russia's forces must overcome drone strikes, trenches, barbed wire, and other fortifications, mines, and anti-tank mines at every turn, and every foot gained likely cost several Russian soldiers their lives. Li said the soldiers had no time to consider the mines. They're too occupied with drones, rifle grenades, and heavy machine guns. All focus on them when they launch an offensive, chopping down large numbers of Russian soldiers as they advance. Russians see the Ukraine war as a meat grinder in which people are sacrificed to acquire land. Even after a successful onslaught, the soldiers are vulnerable. Li said the Russian military prioritized strengthening fortifications after taking a structure because they knew the battle wouldn't cease. Radio channels change hourly. Miss it and you're out. They're alone and can only contact other soldiers if they find them. The Russian occupiers had to construct fortifications swiftly, or Ukrainian mortars and explosives would mark their positions. Li said slacking will bring drones, explosives, and cluster weapons. The message is simple. Even after losing territory, Ukraine persists. The video closes with Li sitting with Little Black in a makeshift safe house. He tells viewers he fought for 4 days and nights. He says street combat kills too many, including his colleagues. Most of his 12-unit members died, and a few were injured. Li says more replaced them, but they died. The camera turns to Little Black, who Li says follows him everywhere. Before Li turns the camera on himself, the man barely mumbles sentences. His war conclusion was all due to Russian stubbornness. No matter how many soldiers Russia loses, Putin won't stop the combat, and Li and his friends will die in the thousands on the Ukrainian battlefield. Li and Little Black briefly pause to listen to the police's "every breath you take" before returning to the fight. At least Li's film proves that Russian soldiers' conditions in the Ukraine war aren't exaggerated. What we heard from Li Jianwei is not just a criticism of the Russian military, but also a sobering reminder of the human cost of war. The brutality, lack of proper medical care, and utter chaos depicted in this video paint a bleak picture of what is happening in Ukraine. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. What do you think about the use of mercenaries in modern warfare?